Li Yuanle and Zhang Miao are a newly married couple. On the second day of their wedding, they went to the resort island of Phuket for their honeymoon. Zhang Miao was met by Li Yuanle through a blind date. He is small and delicate, with fair skin and beautiful appearance. He is a rare beauty. When leaning on Li Yuanle, he still feels like a little bird, so his friends all say that it is a pure luck for Li Yuanle to marry Zhang Miao as his wife. When the two of them followed the tour group to the Prairag Resort Hotel, it was almost evening. Li Yuanle noticed the tour group and found that in addition to Zhang Miao, there was another beautiful woman who was their leader, Xiao An. Xiao An is tall, with a slender waist and plump and round buttocks, exuding a sense of tenacity and strength. After completing the check-in procedures at the hotel front desk, Xiao An came back with his hips twisted. He took the room card and said to everyone in the tour group that there was a newlywed couple in the group, and everyone could wish them a happy wedding together. After saying that, he looked at Li Yuanle and Zhang Miao with a smile in his eyes. Seeing this, the others also applauded with a smile on their faces. Zhang Miao blushed slightly, leaned shyly in Li Yuanle's arms, kissed Li Yuanle sweetly, and whispered that she was so happy. Li Yuanle smiled and hugged him in his arms, leaned close to his ear, lowered his voice, and asked him to promise her, "Don't play tricks." Zhang Miao hit Li Yuanle lightly and said cautiously that there were so many people here, people would eat. The two had just held a wedding banquet yesterday. Because Li Yuanle's friends came to participate, everyone was very happy. After a while, Li Yuanle got drunk. After the banquet, he fell asleep at home and hadn't met the bride yet, so he said that he would give himself to him today. Zhao rather a catching peach blossom eyes contained a smile. He handed Li Yuanle a sea view room with a view of the bright moon on the sea, and also gave him a business card, telling Li Yuanle that he could call him if he had anything. Li Yuanle looked down at the business card and found a scarlet lit print on it. He immediately touched it with his hand. A trace of red spread from his fingertips. It turned out that the lipstick had not dried yet. He looked up at Xiao An, who blinked, and then turned around in high heels to ask for it from others, leaving only a gust of fragrant wind. After receiving the business card, Li Yuanle hugged Zhang Miao into the suite and closed the door. Zhang Miao covered her red face and asked Li Yuanle to take a shot quickly. Before marriage, Li Yuanle had made countless requests, but Zhang Miao always met both, saying that she wanted to save the best of herself for after marriage. So until now, Li Yuanle has not really got him. So Li Yuanle hurriedly took off his clothes and rushed into the bathroom. When he came out of the shower, he found Zhang Miao sitting on a chair next to the window with neat clothes, holding his mobile phone and lowering his head to send a message. Then he pounced on him and groped his hand into Zhang Miao's clothes. Zhang Miao quickly pushed Li Yuanle away and said that the tour leader had just called and asked them to go downstairs for dinner. But Li Yuanle had no time to take care of the dinner, so he told Zhang Miao not to worry about them and to go downstairs later. Zhang Miao was shy and said that this would make others laugh. Li Yuanle had no choice but to get up and wait for them to get dressed and come to the lobby, only to find that everyone had already arrived. Xiao saw Li Yuanle coming and smiled quite ambiguously. He turned his head and said that his zipper was not zipped up. Li Yuanle felt embarrassed and hurriedly turned around to zip up his zipper. Xiao An's soft laughter came from behind him. Because it was already late and the tour group had no other arrangements for today, Xiao An told everyone about tomorrow's itinerary and then lead everyone to the restaurant for dinner. The restaurant is self-service. Li Yuanle and Zhang Miao found a corner to sit down, just as they were loving each other, feeding each other, but unexpectedly, Xiao An came to sit next to Zhang Miao with a plate, smiling. He changed into a short skirt without wearing stockings underneath, with a swaying gait, eyes flowing and charm. Xiao An first greeted Zhang Miao, saying that the people sitting over there were all big and rough, and he didn't want to go over, so he sat down and acted as a light bulb. Then he turned his head and asked Li Yuanle if he would dislike Li Yuanle eating a piece of crab meat that Zhang Miao had eaten, and he said no. During the meal, Li Yuanle accidentally rubbed the spoon on the ground. When he bent down to pick it up, he didn't know if it was intentional, but Jianan actually opened his legs a little, revealing the lavender thong inside. A infinite spring scenery immediately made him a little distracted, so he had to quickly get out, sit down again, adjust his breathing, and forget about Xiao and Sina. Li Yongle suddenly felt a foot touching his calf, smooth and soft. It turned out that Xiao An had taken off her high heels. Li Yongle looked up at him with a smirk on his face and continued to talk to Zhang Miao, but the foot went up and soon reached Li Yongle's abdomen. Li Yongle was worried that Zhang Miao would find out, so he quickly moved his chair and leaned forward. Fortunately, there was a tablecloth blocking Zhao An's movements, otherwise it would be embarrassing. Li Yongle didn't know what his purpose was, but for him, this was an experience he had never had before. So, Li Yongle couldn't help but reach under the table and grab the jade foot that was making trouble. Xiao An took a bite of food with a fork, then held his chin with his hand, squinted his eyes slightly, and his eyebrows were full of charm, sending a wave of electric waves to Li Yongle. After dinner, Li Yongle and Zhang Miao prepared to go upstairs. Before leaving, Li Yongle looked back at Xiao An, who winked at Li Yongle and threw a flying kiss. Back in the room, Li Yongle took another shower, anxious to finish the unfinished business before dinner. But Zhang Miao sat on the bed, hugging the quilt and not saying anything. Li Yongle got on the bed and asked him what was wrong. After a long while, he said sullenly that he had done it. This was undoubtedly a blow to Li Yongle. He was immediately very depressed, but he couldn't lose his temper. After all, that kind of thing requires the right time, right place, and right people. Looking at Zhang Miao's wrinkled and aggrieved face, Li Yongle stroked her hair and said, "It's okay, I'm not in a hurry." Zhang Miao has dismemoration. Li Yongle helped him make a cup of hot ginger tea and finally coaxed him to sleep, but he couldn't sleep. For some reason, when eating, Zhang An squinted his eyes, and his charming face kept appearing in Li Yongle's mind, burning like a wildfire that could not be extinguished. Tossing and turning, Li Yongle finally decided to go out for a walk, smoke a cigarette, and get some fresh air. The whole corridor was quiet. Li Yongle came to the fire escape and took out a cigarette from his pocket, but he took out Xiao An's business card. Looking at the lit print on it, Li Yongle dialed Xiao An's phone number for some unknown reason. Xiao An's slightly hoarse and lazy voice came through the phone, charming and naughty, like a fox stretching. Hearing his voice, Li Yongle hesitated slightly, whispered his name, and then didn't know what to say. At this moment, Xiao An on the other end of the phone suddenly chuckled and said, "Men just like to cheat and are not satisfied, even if they have a wife." Then he reported his room number and asked Li Yongle to come find him. After that, Xiao An hung up the phone. Looking at the phone that had been turned off, Li Yongle unconsciously came to Xiao An's room. He stared at the half-open door and raised his hand several times, and then knocked on the door in front of him. Xiao An in the room said leisurely, "Come in directly." Li Yongle pushed the door open and entered. As soon as he locked the door with his backhand, Xiao An rushed over. He pushed Li Yongle against the door panel and said that there is no man in the world who does not cheat. After saying that, he pressed his soft lips against Li Yongle's mouth. Xiao An's kissing skills are very good. Li Yongle, a grown man, almost had his legs softened by the kiss, especially when he squatted down to serve Li Yongle. It was so exciting. Before he fainted from the beauty's fragrance, Li Yongle wanted to turn over and become the king. He carried Xiao An to the bed and got up. Xiao An's way of playing was still quite fresh. It was like a cloud of fog to seduce Li Yongle. At this time, Li Yongle had already forgotten Zhang Miao and was only thinking about how to eat the beauty in front of him. But Li Yongle had just stripped the person clean and hadn't tasted the freshness yet, when he suddenly heard the sound of the door opening. He didn't pay attention and thought it was the room's staff. He was about to curse for not having eyes, but was suddenly punched. Li Yongle's head was buzzing. He turned around and saw that there were 3 sturdy men. The leading man pressed Li Yongle's neck and forced him to the bed, then sat on the bed and said, "Li Yongle is so bold that he dared to play with his woman. Li Yongle saw that his thick flower arms were full of blue veins and asked them in panic how they got in without himself with the quilt, and then lay in the arms of the flower-armed man, saying that he gave it to him. Li Yongle struggled to ask what they wanted to do, and said that their work was outside. If something happened to him, he could find out that they had been here in the middle of the night. The big man sneered and asked. Li Yongle also knew that it was the middle of the night, and he said that this was the room he booked. As he said that, his hand strength became stronger, and he almost pinched Li Yongle to make him scream. Li Yongle saw this and secretly said that it was not good. It seemed that he had fallen into a trap. The big man went on to say that Li Yongle was eager to cheat on a star right after getting married, so he had to pay a price. He did not ask for much. Li Yongle would give him 200,000 yuan. Yongle stared at Xiaoli fiercely, and he almost cut him into pieces. Xiaolin saw this and asked Li Yongle with a smile, "You don't even have 200,000 yuan. For the sake of his future peaceful life." Li Yongle had no choice but to bargain, saying that he had not yet hooked up with Xiaonan and asking for 200,000 yuan was a bit too much. If it didn't work out, the worst that could happen was that both sides would be ruined, and he would only have a bad reputation, while the other party would have to go to jail. The big man snorted coldly and sent a look to his men. One of them took a fruit knife from the table and scraped Li Yongle's cheek with the cold blade. The big man who was holding Zhao and said in a nonchalant tone that if someone was killed, brought and thrown into the sea to feed the fish, the possibility of domestic police finding the body was as high as finding a needle. At this point, Li Yongle suddenly felt black lines all over his head, and beads of sweat fell from his head. His hands holding the bedsheet could not help but tremble. This was not spending money to avoid disaster, but paying for life. So, Li Yongle said, in a deep voice, that the 2 million yuan would be his own. He transferred the money to the other party on the spot. This was a big move. After hearing the indifferent machine voice prompt that the money had arrived in his arms, Zhao Yizhai's sister's big search for people's wealth was too cruel, and he had to compensate Li Yongle. After the big man confirmed the collection information, he let go of Xiaonan's wrist and let him finish his words. She left the room with 2 men. Xiaonan lifted the quilt, hooked Li Yongle's neck, and leaned forward with his scarlet lips again. He picked up his handy soul-sucking technique again on Li Yongle. Although enjoying it well as a kind of compensation, Li Yongle really didn't feel like continuing to sell this time. He pushed Xiaonan away and left angrily. After returning to his room quietly, looking at his sleeping little wife, Li Yongle took a breath and lay back on the bed and hugged Zhang Miao, thinking that his wife was still the best, and he would never do those things again. The honeymoon trip had just begun. In the next few days, Zhang Miao stayed in the room because of dismoderation and didn't go out. Only Li Yongle followed the big group to play everywhere. Li Yongle and Xiaonan met each other every time. He felt quite embarrassed at first, fearing that Xiaonan would say something or intend to tease him again, but the facts proved that he thought too much. Xiaonan didn't seem to care at all, and Li Yongle seemed to treat them as if nothing had happened. Li Yongle also noticed that Xiaonan had started to hook up with another man named Chen Gang in the tour group. When Xiaonan was explaining the story of the scenic spot on the tour bus, he always deliberately sat in Chen Gang's seat, leaned his body on the back of the chair with his hands, and his buttocks were facing Chen Gang. As for what Chen Gang's hands were doing, the people sitting in the back could not see anything. Every time he saw Xiaonan and deliberately seducing Chen Gang, Li Yongle couldn't help but curse hard in his heart. But it's better to have less trouble than more, and he couldn't possibly meddle in other people's business. At the end of the 3-day and 2-night tour, Li Yongle and Zhang Miao returned to China. Although Li Yongle and Zhang Miao had known each other for a short time and could be considered a flash marriage, he really loved Li Yongle and always took Li Yongle into consideration. Unlike other girls who would get angry and go into a cold war at every turn, he was simply a perfect lover. Originally, Li Yongle thought that the absurdity would be buried in time and life would go on like this. But on the first night after returning to China, Zhang Miao suddenly filed for divorce from him. When the two quarreled, Xiang Miao threw her phone to Li Yuangle, crying hysterically, letting all the neighbors know about their divorce. Li Yuangle picked up the phone, and the video in the phone was only 5 seconds long. It started from the entrance to the interior with two half-naked people stacked together, and then it stopped abruptly. Although neither of them saw their faces, it was obvious that the man was Li Yongle. Zhang Miao couldn't help but see that Zhang Miao was usually a very well-behaved and considerate person. Li Yongle thought that if he comforted him, gave him gifts, and made promises, he would continue to love himself. However, this time was different. Zhang Miao was determined to divorce him, and Li Yongle agreed to the divorce with a stiff neck. But the matter was not over yet. When Li Yongle and Zhang Miao fell in love, Li Yongle thought that he must have a new house, so he used his savings to buy a house in full. At that time, he was in high spirits again, and he was so happy that he added the name of the co-owner Zhang Miao to the property certificate. Now that they are divorced, Zhang Miao doesn't want the house, but only the money. Li Yongle must give him half of the original price of the house. However, after Li Yongle spent more than 2 million to buy the house, he didn't have much savings left. Now Zhang Miao wants Li Yongle to give him 1 million in cash, otherwise he will go to court to negotiate. Li Yongle really has no choice, and he can't bring himself to ask his parents for money, so he sold the house. Before finding a new place to live, he temporarily lives with a good brother. The good brother is called Li Tang. When he was drinking with Li Yongle, he was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground when he heard about his story. Li Yongle drank the beer in his hand and sighed, saying that it was all his fault that he was obsessed for a while, and now he has to bear it. Li Tang nodded, helped Li Yongle pour the wine, and said that he really didn't expect that Zhang Miao had always been very gentle and virtuous. Why did she change so much before and after the incident and kept asking for money? If you don't know, you might think he is a marriage scammer. Li Yongle was startled by a word and broke out in a cold sweat. Thinking back carefully, it seemed that everything was wrong. When Zhang Lao and Li Yongle were dating, it was actually a bit strange because Li Yongle had been dating several people at that time, but she was not satisfied. She had told the agent that she didn't need to introduce anyone to her anymore. But later, inexplicably, Zhang Miao got his contact information and called her to make an appointment. Li Yongle heard that the voice on the other end of the phone was very sweet, and she agreed to meet without asking any more questions. But they were going to get married, and Li Yongle went to the agent to send wedding candy, wanting to thank them for their matchmaking, so that he could have such a precious marriage. But the agent said that Zhang Miao was not introduced by them. Li Yongle was overwhelmed by the joy of marriage at the time, but he didn't know how to ask more questions, and just said that it was okay. No matter whether they introduced it or not, he and Zhang Miao were married, and he still had to thank them. After listening to Li Yongle's words, Li Tang slapped his thigh and said that it sounded wrong. Then he asked Li Yongle, apart from not letting him touch her, was there anything else strange about Zhang Miao? Li Yongle recalled that during their honeymoon, Zhang Lao had been very well behaved, a little deliberately, so he mentioned Xiao Nan. There were several times when the other party approached him in front of Zhang Miao and kept teasing him with words, but Zhang Miao pretended not to see it. Li Yongle thought he really didn't care. Now that I think about it, it's really strange. How could there be a woman in the world who could tolerate Herman being teased by another woman in front of her? Either she is blind or she has something to hide. Li Yongle immediately said, could it be that everything from knowing Zhang Miao to getting married to meeting Zhang, and while traveling abroad, and finally being set up by a honey trap, was all designed? Li Tang laughed. Nodding, he said that it was very likely that they could not just let it go, and they had to take revenge to vent their anger. Li Yongle thought about it, but he didn't know what to do. The honey trap happened abroad, so it was difficult to obtain evidence. In any case, it was hard to say what he did, so he could only take it as what he deserved. As for the marriage fraud, Li Yongle didn't know which intermediary introduced Zhang Miao, and there was no evidence, so there was no way to get revenge. Just when he was annoyed, he suddenly thought of Chen Gang. Maybe that person was still being deceived by Zhang An, and maybe he could get some evidence from him. So Li Yong got Chen Gang's contact information through his friends at the customs, and was anxious to tell him not to be deceived by Zhang An. Li Yong said a lot, and his saliva was almost all over the floor, and he finally made Chen Gang believe him and agreed to come out and meet him. Now, I didn't know until I talked in detail, but I was shocked when I got deeper. I didn't expect that Chen Gang hadn't been honey-trapped, but was on a blind date with his cousin through Xiao An's introduction. Li Rongli immediately said that Xiao An must be deceiving Chen Gang, and maybe he wanted to repeat the same trick and let her be cheated of both money and people like himself. Chen Gang didn't believe it, saying that he knew Zhao and approached him on purpose, and he also knew that he was quite dissolute. But Zhao An's cousin was different. She was a nice person, beautiful and gentle, and he was being urged to get married by his family. Li Yongla quickly said no, and asked Chen Gang to show him the photo of Zhao An's cousin. Chen Gang then took out the photo album on his mobile phone, handed it to Li Yongla, and kept laughing, saying that Zhao An's cousin was very well behaved, and there were few women who were so obedient, and he liked her very much. Being well behaved and obedient, Li Yongla felt gloomy in his heart. Looking at the photo, the so-called Xiao An's cousin was indeed Zhang Miao. Zhang Miao in the photo changed her hairstyle from long black straight hair to short hair, and also wore glasses. During the honeymoon, he said he had menstrual cramps since that night and had not gone out. The tourists in the group had not seen him for many times. Now he had changed his appearance. Chen Gang did not recognize him at all. He was Zhang Miao. Li Yongla almost lost his breath and spent a lot of time to tell Chen Gang about Zhang Miao and showed him the marriage certificate. With the solid evidence, Chen Gang really believed Li Yongla's words from the bottom of his heart and asked him what to do now. Li Yongla thought about it and told Chen Gang his idea. Chen Gang Ping Gang immediately agreed to work together. A few days later, Chen Gang sent a message to Li Yongla. This was the chat record between Xiao and Zhang Miao that he got, which contained the content of bribery during the honeymoon. Xiao Now and the big man named Huang Ji are indeed in the same group. Li Yongla backed up the record and then asked Chen Gang to continue to keep in touch with Xiao and then find a chance to check his mobile phone to see if there was more information about Huang Ji. There was no way. Zhang Miao had already separated from Li Yongla. Li Yongla could not touch his phone, and he was very cautious. Li Yongla had accidentally looked at his phone before and found that the chat software inside basically had no previous records. They were all deleted very cleanly. He was completely in old hands, so now he could only start from Xiao An. Fortunately, Xiao An was not very wary, and Chen Gang was also very capable. He quickly replied to Li Yongla. It turned out that Brother Huang was the whole fraud group. He arranged the first marriage fraud in the honey trap. Xiao and Zhang Miao also followed his arrangements. They made money by this. At this time, Chen Gang suddenly said that Zhang Miao was really good to him, caring and gentle, and he liked him very much. He should not be in the same group with Xiao An, right? Li Yongla almost choked to death when he heard this, so he quickly asked her out to meet. Chen Gang stared at the roses in the vase in the coffee shop, muttering that he felt that Zhang Miao really wanted to marry him, and he should not deceive him into the whole trap. Li Yongla was anxious, slammed the table, and said, "Tell Chen Gang not to get into the drama. I have learned a lesson from blood and tears, and I must not repeat the same mistake." When he came back to his senses, his eyes were a little sad, and he whispered that he knew Zhang Miao was very anxious and wanted to marry him. Li Yongla hurriedly said that Xiao and Zhang Miao wanted to make money from Chen Gang, so they must spread their nets and make arrangements. In order to catch their handles at that time, Chen Gang had to marry Zhang Miaoji first. Chen Gang interrupted Li Yongla and said that he was not wrong. If Xiao An made any moves at that time, he would pretend to cooperate, and then notify Li Yongla as soon as possible, which would be a great achievement. If it weren't for the things Li Yongle said, he would not lose to marry Zhang Miao. Li Yongle was silent with mixed feelings in his heart. Although he knew that Zhang Miao's gentleness and virtue were all for deceiving people, he was a little unhappy when he heard Chen Gang say in front of him that he liked him and wanted to marry her. A week later, Zhang Miao came to Li Yongle to sign the divorce agreement, but Li Yongle refused, saying that the house was still being processed and the things inside had not been moved yet. He would sign after the house was successfully sold. Zhang Miao had no choice. He did not dare to sue Li Yongle. After all, that would be too time-consuming, costly, and laborious. He probably thought that since Li Yongle had already put the house up for sale, he would receive the money sooner or later, so he did not press so hard. Not long after, one day, Chen Gang called Li Yongle to ask him out, saying that he and Zhang Mi were going to get a marriage certificate in a few days, and asked Li Yongle if he had signed the divorce agreement. Li Yongle replied that he had not yet, and said that Zhang Miao had lied to Chen Gang that he had never been married, and he probably had a way to erase the traces. However, if he was investigated like this, he would be guilty of bigamy, which was aggravated. After listening to Li Yongle's words, Chen Gang hesitated for a moment, and asked Li Yongle to sign quickly again, saying that they would divorce sooner or later, and he did not want Zhang Miao to suffer more. Li Yongle almost jumped up on the spot, pointing at Chen Gang's nose and cursing, asking him if he was crazy, saying that if he divorced now, he would really have to sell the house, and if Chen Gang felt sorry for him, he would help him advance the 1 million. What Li Yongle didn't expect was that Chen Gang was really lost in Zhang Miao's gentleness. He really agreed to pay Li Yongle and let Li Yongle get divorced before they got married. Li Yongle, who was very disappointed with his wife, warned Chen Gang again, saying that he had warned him hundreds of times in advance that all this was a scam. When Chen Gang woke up from his dream, he should not cry. Chen Gang's hands trembled and he nodded. The next day, Li Yongle officially divorced Zhang Miao. Less than a week later, Zhang Miao married Chen Gang again. After the marriage, Chen Gang rarely contacted Li Yongle on his own initiative. About a month later, Xiao Nan finally took action, and Chen Gang followed suit and sent the name of the hotel to Li Yongle. Li Yongle reminded Chen Gang to bring the micro camera with him, and also contacted the police to explain the whole story, hoping to send plainclothes police to the scene with him. Based on Li Yongle's description and the chat records he provided, the police made a judgment that this was a fraud crime and agreed to send police. That night, Li Yongle and the police came to the hotel that Chen Gang mentioned and happened to see the flower-armed man who opened the door and threatened people before, breaking in with the two familiar younger brothers, so they followed closely, ready to act. Li Yongle heard the rough and powerful voice of the big man coming from the room. He actually found the micro camera and was angrily questioning Chen Gang. Then, 7 or 8 plainclothes policemen took the cards they had obtained from the hotel staff in advance, pushed open the door and entered in a line. Li Yongle followed them into the room and saw Zhao Nan and the 3 men squatting on the ground, holding their heads with their hands handcuffed, while Chen Gang stood aside and slowly put on his shirt and walked out of the room. Li Yongle immediately followed Chen Gang out the door and asked him what was wrong and why he looked so bad. Chen Gang said disappointed lie that he was fine, but he felt a little sad when he thought about the end, and he couldn't help it. Li Yongle pushed Chen Gang's shoulder hard and asked him if he was lacking love or something, and he really got into the play even though he knew it was all a scam. Shang Gang ignored him. Li Yongle asked himself Zhang Miao was really good to him, and he liked him very much. He was an orphan, had not been educated much, and had no skills to make a living. In order to support himself, he could only do this kind of thing. Li Yongle was furious and asked Chen Gang not to whitewash him, and said that there were many people who had not been educated, and there were so many positions in the world, and they could always find a job if they worked hard, but he just didn't want to suffer himself. Chen Gang didn't say anything, but took out his phone and started looking through the photos of him and Zhang Miao since they got married. Li Yongle asked him again, was the house already there, or was it newly bought for the wedding? After looking through the album, Chen Gang said softly that it was newly bought because Zhang Miao wanted it. And then he bought it thinking that he had to accompany her in the performance. Li Yongle helplessly held his forehead, patted Chen Gang's shoulder, and stopped talking. He couldn't talk to such an infatuated fool. Soon, Zhang Miao was also arrested. Li Yongle applied to the court for recovery, and he didn't know when he could get the 200,000 back. He is a pragmatic person who pursues happiness in the present. After trying this situation, he started to go on blind dates again, hoping to find the right person. Zhang Miao was sentenced to 3 years, and Chen Gang would go to the prison from time to time to visit Zhang Miao and send things. He told Li Yongle about what happened in the previous month and said that he was really moved. In fact, Chen Gang was originally an orphan, but he was lucky and was later adopted by a rich man and became a rich second generation. As luck would have it, Zhang Miao was in the same orphanage as her when she was young, but they were not familiar with each other. Zhang Miao was unlucky and was taken away by a man with abusive tendencies. She was always beaten and dropped out of junior high school. When she became an adult, she met Xiao An. Xiao An had already followed Huang Zhi and Zhang Miao at that time. Seeing that Xiao An could make money with Huang Zhi, he joined them. In fact, Zhang Miao and Jiang An made about the same amount of money before, but Zhang Miao was a little harder. After all, it was really tiring to always be with a man who didn't love her and to always act. After meeting Chen Gang, Zhang Miao was shaken by his tenderness. Chen Gang knew that Zhang Miao was a liar, but he still acted with her being considerate and hypocritical to him. After so long, Zhang Miao suddenly met someone who really understood her, and her heart was moved. So now Chen Gang and Zhang Miao have made an appointment to really live together after 3 years. Li Yongle sneered at Chen Gang, saying that he could make such a promise, but whether he could do it was another matter. 2 years later, Li Yongle got married again. His wife was an ordinary-looking woman, but they loved each other and had a child. As for Chen Gang, before Li Yongle lost contact with him, he had always maintained the habit of visiting him in prison once a month. I wonder if he still insists on it now. Should I pray that he finds a new love? Li Yongle didn't know and didn't want to care because he already had a new life. He didn't want to care about Chen Gang, Zhang Miao, or the past.